The embattled Malaysian Prime Minister advocates unprecedented reforms in his party after recent political losses. Just what went wrong with UMNO, and is the country breaking with its past? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Sami Zaidan. It's being described as an historic crossroads in Malaysian politics. All eyes in Malaysia are on their beleaguered parliament as it reopens its latest session. Opposition leaders are claiming they will take over by the end of the year, shifting the balance of power for the first time in Malaysian political history. Well, the National Front coalition has ruled Malaysia since independence in 1957. It's made up of 13 parties that represent different ethnic groups. At the moment, it's only possible to become a National Front member if you're from one of these groups. Well, the National Front suffered its most painful election result in March this year. It lost its two-thirds majority in Parliament and control of 5 of Malaysia's state assemblies. Prime Minister Abdullah Ahmad Badawi is now suggesting membership not be limited to these ethnic backgrounds in a possible bid to attract a more diverse vote. Well, the Prime Minister has also declared his intention to step down early.
I plan to surrender my post to Mohammed Najib, who will assume the presidency of the party by middle of 2010. As you can see, my intention is to strengthen the party and carry on with the implementation of projects to fulfill the election promises. As such, I will be very happy if my deputy is Mohammed Najib until I hand over my post to him.
Well, Prime Minister Abdullah began his second 5-year term in 2004 after his coalition government won a landslide victory. So what went wrong to make him lose so much ground that he's now forced to resign? Well, in 2006, his deputy was linked to the murder of a young woman. Although he was never charged, the incident severely damaged both his and the Prime Minister's reputations. Well, under Abdullah, Malaysia's multicultural divisions resurfaced, and this year's elections saw the large minority of Chinese and Indians vote for the opposition. Finally, in May this year, Abdullah's predecessor, Mahathir Mohamad, left the main ruling party, a move that some say sealed the current Prime Minister's fate. Well, joining us today are our guests in Kuala Lumpur, Azmi Sharom. He's a columnist and law professor at the University of Malaya. Also in Kuala Lumpur, Tricia Yeo, Senior Research Analyst for the Centre for Public Policy Studies. And in London, Wan Saiful Wan Jan, Director General of the Malaysia think tank in London. Thanks for all of you for joining us. If I could start with Wan. The Prime Minister went from the man who perhaps got the most votes in the history of Malaysian elections in 2004 to the man who lost the most votes in 2008. What went wrong?
I think there's been a lot of discontent among the Malaysian public about what's happening in Malaysia. There's definitely been a more serious racial divide, I think, and it's very unfortunate. But at the same time, it's quite positive for the country as well.
He didn't only lose votes amongst the interesting thing about the elections, it shows he lost support amongst Malays. There was something else going on, not only racial tensions, wasn't there?
I think there's a lot of discontent towards his own administration and the way people see how he's leading the country. He is a little bit unfortunate as well, I think, because he took over after Prime Minister Mahathir, who was a very heavy-handed and very strong, quote-unquote, person in running the country. So, you know, there's a big change in the style of leadership between Mahathir being a very strong Prime Minister, with him being more relaxed, more loose, if you like. And some people say he's weak.
What sort of a person is Najib Razak in terms of authoritarianism and corruption allegations? Can he really represent a step forward for UMNO?
This is a big mystery to me, because Najib has not really been saying much about the reforms that he wants to carry forward or the reforms that he wants to do in Malaysia. He hasn't really been that vocal in advocating any reforms. So I don't really know much about what is his actual agenda, other than taking over as Prime Minister.
All right, let's bring in Mr. Azmi Sharom. Perhaps a little frightening the times for UMNO with somebody taking over who we don't know a lot about in terms of his reform agenda. Do you agree with that analysis?
I don't think he has a reform agenda. He's never mentioned a reform agenda except in passing and in a very flippant way. So I think it's going to be status quo. I don't think Najib is representative of any change. And unfortunately, he also has a lot of baggage, which is exactly what the people are unhappy about with UMNO.
If that is the case, let's go over to Trisha. If that is the case, we have a situation where the number 2 man coming in to take over doesn't represent any kind of reform or change. Is UMNO looking at an even more bleaker future?
Looking at UMNO's track record, I think that analysis is fairly accurate. But I do have to say that of late, he has been talking a little bit about, I wouldn't say reform, but his sort of picture of what he wants for the country in the future. If you look at his new website and how he's trying to be very tech savvy, and some of his recent speeches, he's talked about things like an efficient public delivery system, an efficient civil service, and so on. But these are nowhere near the reforms necessary for both UMNO and the country to go forward. So next year we might be looking at reverse into the sort of Dr. Mahathir type and style of administration.
It's interesting, Trisha, that you mentioned next year there, when the leader of the opposition, of course, is talking about a change as soon as in December. Is that likely?
We also need to look at previous dates that the leader of the opposition has set up for the country. The first, of course, was in September 16th, and such dates have passed without much of a change, really, and he's talked about it again, perhaps in tomorrow opening of Parliament, a no confidence vote, and the next date will be at the end of the year. But I think these dates are not necessarily helpful for the citizens who are setting themselves up for a hope that may not actually be achieved.
All right, Mr. Sharon, the appointment perhaps of Mr. Najib Razak, could that prevent or undermine Anwar Ibrahim, the leader of the opposition's attempts to try and bleed UMNO from within by defections?
UMNO will be stronger in the sense that they won't be fighting with each other as much as they are now. But how will it affect Anwar? I'm not sure, because Najib isn't a particularly popular figure. Badawi, for all his faults, was never really a hated figure. Najib, on the other hand, has a lot of problems, and he could be demonized more easily than Badawi could.
All right, Mr. Wan, accused of corruption, authoritarianism, what can he do to try and cast himself in a light that is favourable to Malaysians?
I think he should start. You're talking about Najib Razak, right?
Yes.
Yes, I think he should start talking about the reforms that he wants to bring to the country from now on. To be fair to him, we have to accept that he is still number 2 in the country. And to expect for the number 2 to be more vocal in advocating reform while he is number 2 in the country and there's someone else leading as the Prime Minister, I think it's a little bit unfair. So now that he has been named by the current Prime Minister as the person who will succeed as Prime Minister from March, hopefully, hopefully to UMNO, I think we should expect more. We should expect to hear more from him. It might be a little bit unfair to say we have not heard so much from him before.
How about on the issue of minorities and his suggestions that membership to UMNO can perhaps take place without being a member of the ethnic-based parties? Is it too late for that sort of movement?
Well, this is a very interesting proposition, I think. I think it was mooted out just a few days ago by Prime Minister Badawi. Not membership directly to UMNO without the ethnic base, but membership to the Barisan Nasional, to the National Front, which is the ruling coalition. It's a very exciting proposal, and I fully support the idea of non-ethnic based political party. It's also important to point out that while we may have only heard this proposal coming up over the last few days, it is not quite a new proposal. It was back in 1960s or 1970s, I can't remember exactly. There was already something called the Alliance Direct Membership Organization. In Selangor, it was led by Peggy Taylor. And this is a structure where within the Barisan Nasional, within the National Front, or at that time called as the Alliance, people can join without actually joining in first the different ethnic-based political parties. I think it's an exciting time. if this is actually implemented within the ruling coalition, within the National Front, it will be another big blow to Anwar's agenda.
All right, that's an interesting point, Tricia Yo. Can that sort of proposal now save some support amongst the ethnic minorities for the ruling coalition?
I think that we can't look at the development of Barisan Nasional, the National Fronts, without looking at the development of UMNO. Like it or not, UMNO still forms the backbone of the National Front. And so should any change, positive or negative, take place, it will have to start at the very beginnings of UMNO. Looking at it from that
in other words, sorry Tricia, you're saying that the process as it's being proposed is starting the wrong way round?
Yes. Not that it's starting the wrong way around, but if you look at the responses that some of the UMNO members have already given, some of them are saying that, oh, that's impossible because it's tantamount to destroying the very structure of UMNO. So there might be a lot of negative responses, not to mention the fine-tuning of how the structure of the entire front is going to be. So as a whole, I do take it as a positive proposal, but how it's going to work out, I'm not sure if that's going to be feasible. But if it does work out, then it is going to be a formidable challenge and a threat to Pakatan Rakyat, because Pakatan is talking about precisely the multi-ethnic appeal to the rest of the country.
Well, how things are going to work out is indeed the question. It's now time for a short break. When we come back, Anwar Ibrahim is making a strong comeback to politics in Malaysia, but what can he offer? Stay with Inside Story.